Executive Director of Sealight. Are you at Stanford University ba ito? Attached to Stanford University. Yung Sealight monitors the situation in the West Philippine Sea, no? And works closely with the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy in monitoring yung situation in the West Philippine Sea for how many years now? For the past?
It's been 3 years.
For the past 3 years. We also have Attorney Dino De Leon, who's a public interest and human rights lawyer, and he is assisting in the second impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte, and helping Congresswoman Leila De Lima in pursuing this case. He's also we can also ask him about the status of the crimes against humanity case against former President Rodrigo Duterte. We're waiting for Jimmy Regalario. He's the chairman of the Kilusang Makabansang Ekonomiya, or MKE, which plans to convene a People's Court or People's Tribunal for the impeachment in the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte. So let's start with Ray Powell. Can you give us a background on Sealight and what it is doing right now?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'll just read a brief statement, if that's okay. So I want to thank everyone for having me. I am Ray Powell. I'm the Executive Director of the Sealight Foundation. We are a maritime transparency advocate and a nonprofit based in California. I actually want to begin today with a tribute to some personal heroes of mine, the officers and crew of the Philippine Coast Guard, and particularly of the BRP Suluan, whose change of command I was privileged to attend on Thursday. As you'll recall, on August 11th of last year, the crew held their course at Bajo de Masinloc, while much larger Chinese Navy and Coast Guard vessels bore down on them at high speed. And when those vessels collided with each other in the chase, the Suluan sailors immediately offered medical assistance. I'd like to repeat something I said last year. The world has never witnessed a Coast Guard that has routinely demonstrated the courage, resilience, devotion to duty, professionalism, and restraint that the men and women of the Philippine Coast Guard have displayed while standing out for their country's sovereign rights against overwhelming odds. Now, I raise this because the bravery of those sailors only makes sense when you understand the full scope of what they are up against. Beijing's goal is not merely to control the reefs and shoals in the West Philippine Sea. It is to convince the people of the Philippines to stop resisting, to accept Chinese control as a permanent fact of life. And for that, their campaign of maritime occupation depends on an equally aggressive campaign of political warfare right here in Manila. For the past several months, Sealight has been investigating the machinery that lies deep behind that campaign, a network of interlocking organizations all connected to the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department, all operating here in the Philippines, though most Filipinos have never heard of them. The connections are not a secret, but they are written in a language most Filipinos don't speak. They are in the organization's own publications, in Chinese state media, or in the Chinese embassy's own press releases. We simply started reading what they wrote about themselves in Mandarin. We began at the center of the campaign, where the connections to the Chinese Communist Party were clearest and the most plainly spoken. The Philippine Council for the Promotion of the Peaceful Reunification of China is one of more than 200 councils worldwide controlled by the CCP's United Front Work Department. Last October, the council held a regional forum here in Manila, 300 delegates, 7 countries, congratulatory messages from Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office, and multiple Chinese provincial governments, with the Chinese Embassy Chargé d'Affaires personally administering the new officers' oath of office. Among those in attendance was the chief editor of the United Daily News, one of Manila's most prominent Chinese language newspapers, a man named Dong Bakui, who has simultaneously served as the council's Secretary General since 2011. So for nearly 15 years and 7 board terms and 5 different presidents. That the editor of one of Manila's oldest Chinese language news outlets is also the leader of its most important CCP-linked council is not an accident, because the Mandarin press has been one of Beijing's most important conquests here in the Philippines. Our January investigation documented Ambassador Jing Quan summoning executives of 8 Manila Mandarin language outlets, telling them to cooperate closely with the embassy and, quote, carry forward patriotism and love for the homeland. He was not talking about the Philippines. It's not just the media, however. Chinese language education has also been a particular target of the CCP. Since 1991, the Philippine Chinese Education Research Center has run what Beijing calls the blood transfusion plan, dispatching nearly 5,000 mainland Chinese teachers to the Philippines' Chinese language schools through a United Front administered program. Unsurprisingly, the center's chairman, Huang Guanming, simultaneously holds a formal advisory position within the Reunification Council. And it was he who signed a letter under his Filipino name, James Wang, requesting that public school classrooms here in Manila be open to a CCP-designed World War II anniversary essay contest, encouraging Filipino children to frame Japan as an enemy and write about the spirit of joint resistance. That request, exploiting Philippine public school children for Beijing's propaganda purposes, was approved, resulting in DepEd Regional Letter number 107. We published that story in The Diplomat 2 weeks ago. Now, I want to be very, very clear about something. This is not about stigmatizing the Chinese Filipino community. Indeed, ethnic Chinese citizens worldwide are among the first victims of these United Front organizations. Their institutions have been infiltrated, their community organizations have been co-opted, and their voices have been claimed by a foreign power that does not represent them. Our investigations don't seek to target them. They instead target the hostile foreign state that seeks to take over those institutions and exploit them. So you might ask why a maritime transparency organization is investigating Mandarin newspapers and Chinese school curricula. The answer is that these are at the heart of what analysts now call FIMI, Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Operations. Beijing didn't start its influence campaigns on social media or in English language op-eds. It started inside the Chinese language institutions it has spent decades building or quietly taking control of right here in Manila. The Reunification Council, the newspapers, the Education Center, these are its core infrastructure. Everything else radiates outward. And that is exactly why the embassy works so hard, the Chinese embassy works so hard to silence anyone who looks too hard. Since January, it has issued 8 official statements attacking Sealight and me by name. Its ad hominem attacks have not disputed a single fact we presented. It has done the same to the Philippine critics and investigators, such as the PCIJ and journalist Regine Cabato, after their investigation into pro-Chinese propaganda. The Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, and the National Union of Journalists have all rallied to their defense. I stand with PCIJ. I stand with Regine Cabato. I stand with all those who stand up to bullies and tell the truth without apology. The Philippines already has a model for how to respond. Its internationally celebrated maritime transparency campaign that made China's aggression at sea visible to the world. This same principle applies to malign foreign influence. As my podcast co-host Jim Caruso and I argued last month in an op-ed for the Philippine Star, a foreign influence transparency law, similar to Australia's, that simply requires organizations resourced by or operating at the direction of a foreign government should be required to declare it publicly. The Philippine Coast Guard's courage and devotion to duty is beyond reproach, but Beijing's campaign to violate the Philippines' sovereign rights does not end at the shoreline. Its gray zone campaign at sea is tightly linked to its political warfare campaign here in Manila. Fighting back begins with clearly recognizing the threat. And thank you, and I'm happy to entertain your questions.
Let's open the floor for questions from media at this point. Or would you like to ask questions from Mr. Ray Powell?
Good morning, Mr. Powell. I'm glad you have made some sort of expose about what the Chinese are doing here. And just to be specific, who are these guys doing this, especially those people are maligning our institutions here. Anything that must be concrete? Can you kindly name them? Are you referring to that bakery over there in Kamuning?
So we are continuing our investigations. We decided to begin in the Chinese language space because that seemed to be the closest to the heart of the operation. So we are aware of the bakery operated by Wilson Lee Flores and others. The kinds of people who go to that forum, I think, are very clear in what their agenda is. And frankly, I want to say this: everyone is free to have, in a democracy, which I believe the Philippines, represents. Everyone is free to have their opinions, and if their opinion is something that is closer to close cooperation with China, they should be free to have those opinions, I believe. Again, I'm not here to tell the Philippines how to run its democracy, but I believe in democracy, and I think freedom of speech and freedom of the press and all of those things are expressions of that. So what we're focused in on is just identifying where the Chinese government has extraordinary control and is resourcing and directing what is being said. So that is why we are beginning with the Philippine Council for the Promotion of the Peaceful Reunification of China, with the Philippine Chinese Education Research Center, and with these Chinese language media outlets who are clearly communicating propaganda that begins and appears to be directed by Beijing. Yeah, I think. Well, I think it's important to begin with the fact that the propaganda ministry in Beijing, that the United Front Work Department, these are massive organizations. Of course, they have global reach, and the Philippines is only one of many targets of its operations. I don't have an estimate as to how much they spend in the Philippines. I'm not really sure even how you would begin to count that. And of course, a lot of the funding is not visible to the public or to those who even, do the investigations. I certainly would look forward to somebody who is able to do those forensics. And I want to be clear, we've only just started our investigations, and what we hope is to see a lot of other people sort of dig into this. I will also say that for those in the press, one of the things that has made it much easier now to look into these things has been the advent of AI, which can be an amazing research assistant if you tell it to search in Mandarin. If you say, I would like to know what has been said about this individual or by this individual in Chinese, you can actually open up a world. And again, that's part of why we're so interested in this space, because for decades, the Chinese language press, the Chinese language websites, all of these things have told the truth about themselves. It's just that nobody was paying attention because so many people here don't actually speak Chinese. And so, using AI to help do the research and and the translation has been extraordinarily helpful to us.
Director, to your knowledge, is the government of the Philippines that infiltrated by the Chinese spies?
I don't have any special knowledge about Chinese espionage, so I can't speak to that directly. That's why we have been focused more on so there's kind of a range of issues when it comes to foreign influence, and it goes all the way from sort of open propaganda, which, things that all governments do, through foreign interference, which is the kind of thing that we're really talking about, the kinds of things that in an open society is an especially sort of weak spot for any democracy. And so its laws need to sort of catch up to where the threat is. And then, of course, all the way to espionage, which is already illegal. So I'm not aware personally of any place where espionage is taking place, and I'm not sure I would be the best person to find out.
You've been monitoring the situation in the South China Sea as a whole since 3 years ago. What pattern have you discovered insofar as Chinese behavior is concerned?
Yeah.
Can we see an escalation of Chinese presence in the West Philippine Sea and
Yes.
the possibility of more violent incidents?
So we have been tracking, as you mentioned, for 3 years. We saw a special escalation in the summer of 2023 when China surged maritime militia and China Coast Guard down deep into the Spratly Archipelago. We saw a continuation of that in 2024, in particular an expansion of its control around Bajo de Masinloc, basically forming what we have referred to as an exclusion zone around the shoal, which now Philippine fishermen and Philippine Coast Guard cannot get in. As I speak right now, we are tracking what appears to be a Kadiwa operation that the Philippines is carrying out in the vicinity of Bajo de Masinloc, but of course it can't get closer than about 30 nautical miles to the shoal, which is an extreme hardship for the fishing communities in Zambales. We also saw in the mid to late summer of 2024 an expansion of Chinese control over Escoda Shoal. Of course, we all viewed the dramatic showdown with the BRP Teresa Magbanua, which was essentially blockaded until its medical condition of the crew on board had to be resolved and the ship had to go back to Palawan. Since then, China has not yielded its effective control of Escoda Shoal, which it monitors very closely. So we have continued to see a buildup of Chinese paramilitary activity across the West Philippine Sea, to the extent to which we have begun to refer to it as a maritime occupation. And the reason we have done that is, one is because we think it's accurate. It's a little bit unusual and even unheard of in history to have a maritime occupation, but we think it's an accurate description of what's happening. And we think it's also helpful for the government of the Philippines to think in terms of how does one resist an occupation. In the end, occupations tend to end when the occupying force wears out and asks itself why it's still doing something so resource intensive and destructive, but it's a long-term resistance that we think is probably what's in store.
Director, for the past 2 or 3 years, the Chinese activities in West Philippine areas are escalating. It coincided with the build-up of missile arc of the Philippines, the HIMARS, BrahMos, NMESIS, and the Typhoon missile system. Are the Chinese conducting what they call political brinkmanship, or they just don't respect the capability of our defense system?
Well, I think what you're recognizing, and I would put the cause-effect as China's buildup of forces in the West Philippine Sea has prompted the government of the Philippines and its partners and allies to step up their defensive measures. And one of the things I think that even Secretary Teodoro has commented on and I conducted an interview with him last year for our podcast, is that the Philippines needs to have its own credible deterrent. The Philippines has, of course, for decades been reliant, for the most part, on the U.S. treaty alliance for its deterrent, but the Philippines needs to have its own deterrent. And so purchasing BrahMos missiles, those kinds of measures, of course, allowing in the U.S. mid-range missiles and those kinds of anti-ship missiles, and building relationships with Japan and other regional powers are all part of the Philippines increasing its own credible deterrent. And I think that's going to have to go on for a while, in order to force China to think about the Philippines' deterrent before it takes its own actions.
About deterrence, there are two incidents that show something about Chinese military equipment, Venezuela and Iran. Their technology, well, they call that TEMO defense system. Will China now, or are they respecting now the capability of the Philippines, especially the missile system from the U.S. and the Taiwanese capability more than they respect before the incident in Iran and in Venezuela?
Well, so it's difficult to evaluate how China would operate its own systems based on how Venezuela and Iran have operated Chinese systems, right? So those two things aren't necessarily the same thing. What we all, I think, hope is that events over the last several years, including, by the way, the disastrous decision of Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine, and the failure of the Russian war machine to achieve its objective of taking over Kyiv in 3 days, but instead to devolve in a horrific war. We hope that these things resonate in Beijing, and that they change Xi Jinping's calculus as to whether or not open warfare works out in the same way, especially when you think of an invasion of a sovereign state. I understand that Beijing does not consider Taiwan to be a sovereign state, but we'll leave that to them. But that is what we hope. Now, the thing, of course, is that nobody can get inside the mind of an autocrat, and we thought prior to the invasion of Ukraine that Vladimir Putin should see that that would be a foolish decision, and he clearly did not see that. So we hope that Xi Jinping is taking constructive lessons from watching what's been happening.
We've been hearing statements from just the previous presidents, Biden and Trump, that they've been reassuring us that of an ironclad commitment under the Mutual Defense Treaty. How will this affect our efforts to have a credible defense posture? How should we build up our capability militarily?
Yeah. So I think what we have noted is that there have been a few different effects, especially when you consider the Philippines' decision to adopt its transparency policy. And two of those effects in particular we think are very noteworthy. One is that the Philippines has developed an increased national resilience against this maritime occupation. You've seen it in civil society, you've seen it in the public discourse, you've seen it in the arise of organizations like Atinito and others, and you've seen it in the government, which has made tough decisions to increase its own capacity in the maritime space. You've seen it in the reworking of the national security concept around archipelagic defense. All of those things, I think, are a direct result of the Philippine people being made aware of what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. The second major thing that has been an increase in support internationally. I know that many Filipinos are disappointed in the kind of support that they've seen from ASEAN nations, but that should not take away from the support that they've received from Japan, Australia, the EU, South Korea, the US and Canada. You've seen that actually take not just moral support, but material support. You've seen it in commitment of funds from the United States, of ships and radars from Japan, of ships from France, of dark vessel detection from Canada. All of these things happen because those countries look at the Philippines and say they are involved in an existential threat for their sovereignty, and this is where we should devote our resources to help. And so those things, I think, have happened and are happening and are contributing to the Philippines building out its capacity and building out its deterrent.
If I can add to that, just for purposes of the West Philippine Sea, one of the things that we have to take a look at is what we call the concept of elite capture. No, that is the strategy of Beijing in the West Philippine Sea. Ano pong ibig sabihin nito, no? Ang ibig sabihin nito ay ang doktrina sa China is they want to win the West Philippine Sea without firing a single shot. Kaya hindi naman yan direct confrontation, no? Ang main strategy rin nila is the elite capture, meaning they will use our own elite, including politicians, to make sure that we're divided as a nation and that they will use them as the mouthpiece to discourage policies that will allow us to be victorious in the West Philippine Sea. So we have to also be very careful and to watch out yung mga politicians na nagiging traitor at ine-echo yung rhetoric ng Beijing, including in the Senate and the House. No, that is, I think, one of the most important things that we have to watch out for as a nation, because we can have a credible defense posture, we can have great allies, but if we have leaders from within who will refuse to defend our stand in the West Philippine Sea and will echo Beijing's rhetoric in the very halls of Congress, including the Senate and the House of Representatives, then we'll be in trouble as a nation. This is doctrine in Beijing. They will win the West Philippine Sea without firing a single shot. It's just going to be cheaper for them to co-opt our own policymakers, our own elite, and our own leaders.
Sige po, Attorney. Tanong ko na rin sa inyo, sino yung mga elite na na-capture na? Since ikaw ang nagbukas ng topic na yan.
Well, my background is on national security law. I studied in Washington, D.C. as well, no, in Georgetown. And when we're taking a look at the behaviors of specific individuals in the Senate, nakita naman rin ito, di ba, kinumpara nga ni Senator Lacson yung rhetoric ni Senator Marcoleta in particular. In fact, parang photocopy ng mga pronouncements doon sa Ministry of Foreign Affairs ng China, no? Makikita rin natin na paulit-ulit na tinatakot tayo nila Robin Hood Padilla, nila Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, na bakit tayo ganito mag-confront, gusto ba natin ng giyera? As if there is already that false choice. The choice that they are offering the Filipino people is, huwag kayo magsasalita kung hindi, gigirahin tayo. That is a false choice. And if they push that particular narrative and rhetoric, that is precisely falling into the trap being laid out by Beijing to the Filipino people. So kung naniniwala tayo dyan sa false choice na yan at ina-advance nila yung ganyang false choice na gera ang alternative, maging weary tayo kasi yan exactly yung propaganda na gustong i-advance sa atin ng Beijing.
Sa DFA, Department of Foreign Affairs, meron bang elite capture na nangyari din dyan? Isa-isahin natin, yung ambassador ng Pilipinas sa China. Anong tingin niyo sa kanya?
Well, alam mo, magagaling yung mga natin, yung mga diplomats natin. They're the very best in the world, no? And makikita natin na mahirap yung trabaho ng foreign affairs kasi we don't have a very strong military teeth and capability. So usually, the best thing that we have is diplomacy, especially since ang daming mga Pilipino abroad. At makikita natin, mabilis rumisponde yung Department of Foreign Affairs. No? Having said that, of course, if you would know the structure of the Department of Foreign Affairs, marami dyan, ang half dyan halos political appointees, half yung career. No? Yung mga career natin, napakagaling yan. The FSO trainings is one of the most difficult in the world. No? And I have no doubts that they have full allegiance to the flag. Pero it will also largely depend on the political structure, on how we will appoint the other half, which is yung mga ambassadors, no? Yung Secretary of Foreign Affairs himself. So, in the past, nakita natin na we barely had a very strong stand on the West Philippine Sea under the Duterte administration when Alan Peter Cayetano was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. So, what I'm saying is, largely, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Foreign Affairs, will also largely depend on the political will of the administration. So for so long as we have very powerful, influential people who are pro-Beijing and who are defending the interests of Beijing or China over and above the Filipino people, that's when we're going to be in trouble as a country. So the Department of Foreign Affairs, they will do their job, no? But it's up to us well to the politicians that we elect in this country.
To Mr. Powell, how reliant is Manila on the U.S. in terms of the Mutual Defense Treaty? And number two, how should the Filipinos understand the limits of MDT in terms of its actual intervention?
Sure. So obviously, a mutual defense treaty is by definition mutual, right? So it is one of those things that you do rely on. And it is an important capability and builder of capacity. The United States obviously has a very robust Office of Defense Cooperation, or we call it JustMag here in the Philippines, that puts a lot of resources into helping with the Philippine defense. I think that it is important to say that any mutual defense treaty, any treaty, ultimately is a document that reflects political will. And I have said this publicly in the United States. I've said it in front of the Senate. I've said it in front of 60 Minutes, is that were the United States to be seen to abrogate or to fail to live up to the terms of any treaty, including that with the Philippines, it would threaten its entire treaty structure internationally. So, and that would include the treaties that it has with NATO and with Japan and with South Korea, and because ultimately every treaty is a political document. There's no lawyer, there's no court that will rule against the United States if it fails to live up to its treaty obligations. But what would happen would be the entire treaty structure would suffer if the United States were seen to have done that.
On another note, many believe that the situation now in the West Philippine Sea is a long-term war of attrition. Do you believe that, Mr. Powell? And if so, how can the Philippines sustain it given our limited resources?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say attrition because I'm not sure what's being attrited. I would say, as I did before, a struggle of resistance. So I have drawn the analogy to the U.S. civil rights movement in the 1960s, and I do that with this particular bias because my father was involved in the civil rights movement. And when he was involved in the Freedom Rides of 1961, part of his training was learning how to go out and resist without striking back. So that's where I give so much credit to the Philippine Coast Guard, and by the way, we should also mention BFAR in their brave struggle of resistance where they do not hit back. They do not, they're often asked, why don't we have our own water cannons? Why don't we? Well, ultimately what the nonviolent direct action tactic is meant to do, it's meant to highlight an injustice and draw attention to the injustice and over a long period of time force change in the system. The civil rights movement did not end with the Freedom Rides of 1961. It was a long struggle in which over a long period of time, the oppressing force, the Jim Crow South, the governments of some of those states were forced to change their policies, and ultimately the United States changed its law because of the attention that was brought on the injustice by the tactic of nonviolent direct action. And so I look at what the Philippines is doing in the West Philippine Sea in that long-term space. And again, whenever you think of a struggle for resistance or a war of resistance, you have to think, what is the long-term outcome that we desire?
I want to ask a question to the three guys. You see the other guy, Mr. Jamie Regalario, my friend, has not yet touched the microphone. By the way, he was the one who recruited me in our own movement here in the Philippines. That was way back more than 50 years ago. Anyway, going back to the topic of the Chinese initiatives here in the Philippines, well, we could see it's in many levels, in propaganda, in political, and etc., even in military. are you in a way, I want to direct my question to all of you, are you in a way satisfied with the, or not, with the way the Philippine government handles those Chinese initiatives? And what should be done? Does it leaves the way much to be desired? Sige.
By the way, I'm Jimmy Regalario, the chairman of Kilusang Makabansang Ekonomiya. So we're very much concerned about the issue on West Philippine Sea. Ngayon, ang comparison, there was a time, some time ago, no? There was a conflict between China and Vietnam. And it is about territories, question on territories. The only solution that has put an end to it, yung mass movement. I think it was publicized in so many media, international media, that the Vietnamese went out in mass by the tens of thousands, by the hundreds of thousands, and denounced, condemned the intrusion of China to their territory, and that puts an end to the conflict. And I think yung response of the Filipinos in this issue, hindi masyadong, I don't think that they're well-versed about the issue. I don't think that the Filipino people is well-versed about the things that we are missing if West Philippine Sea or the Kalayaan Island Group will be lost and will be taken by China. So yung feeling of nationalism and yung willingness to fight for their rights and their own properties, wala dun sa mga kababayan natin. And I think the media should help in stirring up the masses, stirring up the people to be aware of the importance of this issue. Wala pa akong nakitang mobilization or protest action against China, while it is being discussed and debated upon in Congress, in the Senate specifically. Walang reaction from the people. So I think it's high time for us to let the people be aware of the importance of this issue. Tapos, kailangan natin talagang mag-educate, no? From the academy to the church. Like for example, our organization, we're beginning to have some fora and continuing discussion that we have to intervene. We have to put up a strong intervention na ipakita sa tao na napakahalaga ng usapin na ito ng West Philippine Sea. So, sana, with the media's help, makatulong yung academe and the church. Kasi yung organization namin, we have 4 bishops who happens to be members of the organization. We have 22 congregations from the Catholic Church. And the academe, we have UP, Ateneo, San Beda, and PUP, as well as UST. So if we combine these forces and inform them about the importance of this issue, and if we will be able to strengthen or fortify our efforts to guard this economic interest that we have in the West Philippine Sea, it could help a lot. For our people who are now suffering in this economic crisis, and we are living in a situation by which we survive from one crisis to another, a crisis after crisis type of economic situation. So, ang stand namin, we will try to mobilize, we will try to organize, and we'll try to tell the people to move and mobilize the way the Vietnamese did during the time that there was conflict between Vietnam and China on the question of territory.
I'll just say that I was actually in Hanoi in 2014 when that happened.
Yeah.
I was posted to the U.S. Embassy there while I was still serving in the military. That was an extraordinary time. It's as a communist government, the Vietnam is not accustomed to having mass movements in the streets, so it was a really interesting time to be there. I would just say very quickly before I pass the microphone over that Sea Light is very careful not to comment directly on internal Philippine government affairs. We are a U.S.-based nonprofit. We take no government money. We take very little money at all. We are actually very lightly funded by donors. And yeah, I mean, I'm cognizant that I myself am a foreigner, right? So when you talk about foreign influence, I'm a foreigner, and obviously I'm standing here with a microphone, so I guess I have influence. I think that there is a distinction between this and a foreign state government exercising influence in its own way. And so what we have called for, we don't seek to advocate for any particular political politician or political party for or against in the Philippines. What we want to do is draw attention to a hostile foreign state that is exercising undue influence. And so again, my podcast co-host Jim Caruso and I recommended in our op-ed in the Philippine Star a few weeks ago is that the Philippines very carefully study and maybe even enlist the help of the Australian government to study their foreign influence transparency scheme, which they passed almost a decade ago, and isn't perfect, but it has, it's got its pluses and minuses, and I think that the Australian government would admit to you that they learned a lot of lessons, both positive and negative, from the exercise, but it can serve as a roadmap to begin the Philippines' own political process of deciding what laws or regulations it should be passing or observing or putting into place to combat undue foreign interference.
Bago natin shift ang topic para dun sa primary topic na pinunta ni Attorney De Leon sa impeachment, pigain ko lang yung kanyang training and yung pag-aaral niya about national security. Attorney, ano ang pwedeng gawing kasunod ng pamahalang Pilipinas? Kasi right now, kanina ko lang naisip, yung damdamin ng Pilipino, in US, we have a friend that we cannot love. And in China, we have an enemy that we cannot fight.
Hello. Ayaw, no. Tingnan muna natin yung datos, no. Overwhelmingly, nagsumusuporta mga Pilipino sa depensa sa West Philippine Sea, around 76 to 84% based on data. Filipinos support government action in the West Philippine Sea, at least right now. Around 83% explicitly support protecting WPS territory, and 85% has a very high distrust sa China. Batay po yan sa mga datos ng WR, Numero, SWS, Pulse Asia, Okta Research. Yan po yung mga datos sa oras na ito. Pero ang kailangan is mag-translate po yung datos na yan doon sa mga ine-elect natin na leaders. Bakit? Because as Mr. Powell said a while ago, the Transparency Initiative and all our efforts in the West Philippine Sea is a long-term struggle. And alam naman natin, nung nakaraang administrasyon is the worst kind of resistance that we've had insofar as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. We almost gave up, the struggle in the West Philippine Sea. The arbitral tribunal's ruling in the Permanent Court of Arbitration was called as a piece of useless paper by the President himself. We will declare as a province of China in Beijing. The Vice President right now even had an embarrassing scheme of greeting Xi Jinping in Chinese. Reading it, di ba? Parang nakakahiyang, para sobrang tutang-tuta yung Vice President. And the President himself, former President Rodrigo Duterte, is saying he simply loves Xi Jinping. What's the point, no? The point is, right now, Sara Duterte is also threatening to become the president. I say threatening because she already declared. And I feel like her being in Malacanang will be the single biggest threat insofar as our initiatives in the West Philippine Sea is concerned, considering that, number one, Sara Duterte never spoke about our overall situation in the West Philippine Sea. You've never heard her condemn China's aggression in the West Philippine Sea. In fact, what we hear is almost honoring China time and again, despite their aggression in the West Philippine Sea. So if we want to have a clear path in the West Philippine Sea, we have to understand na long-term struggle po ito. at hindi pwedeng bumalik sa mga kapangyarihan yung mga traidor at yung mga tuta ng Beijing, including, in my clear opinion, Sara Duterte.
Let's go to the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte. You are helping Congresswoman Laila De Lima sa pagpurso ng case before the Committee on Justice.
Yeah.
Ano yung developments dito?
I'm counsel for the second impeachment complaint. I'm part of Tindig Pilipinas, the CSO Guild, no, which is one of the hubs of Tindig Pilipinas. And I just want to say that, of course, we are concerned about the impeachment process, and we have to make sure that accountability will be honored, no? The constitutional provision on accountability. Let's remember po na ang impeachment is part of the accountability of public officers, part of the Constitution. Ibig sabihin, ang pinaka-importante po dyan, accountability, hindi kung ano-anong teknikalidad, no? We should remember the context last year, which is there was already an overwhelming vote of the House of the People, the House of Representatives. 215 legislators voted for impeachment. What happened? No? Unfortunately, due to technicalities, that particular will of the representatives of the people, which is a reflection of the current political will, was frustrated due to technicalities. But even in that frustration, through the decision of the Supreme Court said itself that it was not exonerating Sara Duterte on the grave allegations. Ano pong ibig sabihin yan? Grabe ang mga alegasyon, walang napawalang sala. So, ano ba ang nagbago? Pareho naman yung mga alegasyon. Ibig sabihin, ang kailangan ay mayroong mag-explain at may managot. Unfortunately, right now, after being given the chance to answer the allegations against her, what we've had is a non-answer. Ibig sabihin, hindi naman sinagot kung ano yung mga alegasyon. Bumalik na naman sa teknikalidad. Ang sinabi, wala daw ultimate fact na allegation. Alam niyo po, ito po yung mga attempt na, and ito po ang mastery kasi ng Duterte camp, no? Yung tinatawag nating dilituhin tayo, yung tinatawag nating diversion, yung tinatawag nating muddling of the issues. So subukan nating klaruhin. Ano ba ang ultimate fact, no? Ang ultimate fact po, ang ibig sabihin nito, what must be proven? Anong kailangang patunayan? Ibig sabihin, ang ultimate fact po doon sa complaint, ang sinasabi, winaldas mo ang confidential funds. Tama? Yun po yung ultimate fact. Ano mga patunay noon? Yun yung tawag nating evidentiary fact. No? Ito yung mga vouchers, ito yung mga testimonies. Pero, meron bang ultimate fact na aligasyon? Meron. Ano bang kailangang patunayan? What must be proven? Ibig sabihin, ang aligasyon ay siya ay nagwaldas at nagnakaw sa confidential funds. Yun ang kailangan niyang sagutin. Kaso ayaw niyang sagutin, ginagawa na naman ng mga teknikalidad. So we're a little bit concerned about the attitude of the Vice President in Tindig Pilipinas, in the CSO Guild, no, and even in the Human Rights and People Empowerment Center, which I'm a trustee. We're very much concerned because the attitude is a non-answer. The attitude is against accountability, which is the very soul of the Constitution. Let's also remember that it's not just accountability we're talking about. We're also talking about fitness of character. Ano ibig sabihin yan, no? Ang impeachment po ay constitutional process of accountability, pero it is also our ability to assess the fitness of the high official to remain in office in terms of her overall character. Hindi po tayo pwedeng ma-stuck sa isang plunderer. Hindi po tayo pwedeng ma-stuck kung compromise yung tao. Hindi din po tayo pwedeng ma-stuck kung unhinged and unstable yung tao. Ito po yung mga alegasyon, no, sa impeachment complaint. Lalong-lalo na, ang isang alegasyon doon ay hindi niya lang trineten, Hindi niya lang trineten yung presidente ng Pilipinas, yung dating Speaker of the House, yung First Lady. Hindi niya lang trineten. Ang sinabi niya, nangontrata na siya ng assassin. Tama? So it's not just the threat that is the problem, it is the fact that she already contracted an assassin. And hindi pwedeng walang managot doon. Hindi pwedeng pabayaan ito ng ating national security cluster. Hindi pwedeng gagawing joke to kasi hindi nakakatawa. At sawang-sawa na rin po yung Pilipinas dun sa mga joke na kagaya nung sa kanyang ama, di ba? So yun po, we just want to express our concern about the accountability process, and hopefully, because nothing has changed and Sara Duterte was not exonerated by the Supreme Court, dapat the same kind of people who voted for impeachment last year should vote again and make sure that that accountability will be the primary consideration and nothing else. Hindi dapat politika, hindi dapat maapektuhan ng fact na nag-declare na siya ng kanyang presidency. It should be accountability as reflected no less than in our most sacred document, which is ang ating saligang batas, the Constitution.
Merong sinabi si Attorney Dean ng Santa Maria. Sinasabi niya na yung parang move ng VP to consider the impeachment, the newest impeachment complaint as junk na without any basis, baseless, you know. This is simply part of a strategy by VP Sara to appear weak at this point. Pero ang ultimate battle will be in the Senate where she holds parang at least sure na siya na may 9 na minority senators who will vote for junking yung impeachment.
Yeah, allow me to mag-rephrase nung ganong question. Pag narinig namin yung paliwanag na the ultimate battle is in the Senate, are we falling into Sara Duterte's trap?
Sa akin po palagay, every step of the impeachment proceeding is important. Yan nga po in-emphasize ng Supreme Court last year. Hindi po ba? Ang sabi ng Supreme Court, kailangan daw nabigyan si Sara Duterte ng due process. Not just in the trial itself, kasi ang stand ko po bilang isang abogado at continuing student of the law is the due process that the Supreme Court was looking for was supposed to happen during the trial. Tama? At saka pinasagot naman siya. Ngayon, yan po ang binibigay dito sa committee sa baba. So, to me, even what's happening before the Committee on Justice is very much sacred. At doon pa lang po, parte na po yun ang sinasabi nating battle. So, siyempre, meron ding magkakaroon ng battle doon sa Senate. Ang question, makakaabot ba doon? Dito muna tayo ngayon sa nangyayari sa committee. At sa akin pong paniniwala, batay na rin po sa desisyon ng Korte Suprema nung nakaraang taon na hindi magpatuloy itong impeachment complaint, kailangan may proceedings dito sa Committee on Justice. So, ang ine-expect ko po na tugon ng Committee on Justice bilang abogado noong second impeachment complaint would be to already subpoena yung mga documents, including the bank records of Sara Duterte and Rodrigo Duterte. Nakakapagtaka lang po, ang sabi nila noon, nung panahon ni Rodrigo Duterte, kung wala ka namang tinatakot, wala ka namang tinatago, wala ka dapat ikatakot. Kung hindi ka naman adik, wala ka dapat ikatakot. Ilang beses na po silang challenge na buksan ang kanilang bank accounts. Ayaw nila. Tandaan niyo po ang alegasyon around 2 billion pesos ang umikot na pera sa joint bank account ni Sara Duterte at Rodrigo Duterte. At milyon-milyon ang pumasok di umano na nanggaling doon sa mga well-known drug personalities. Yun po ang sinasabi na alegasyon. Yun po yung ultimate fact na hinahanap nila. Ang evidentiary fact, yung ipapasampina na yung bank accounts. Question, bakit ayaw nila Sara Duterte at Rodrigo Duterte ipakita yung bank accounts nila para matapos na? Meron po ba talaga silang tinatago? At tandaan natin na ito ay na-flag doon sa report na dati sa investigasyon ng ombudsman. So, what we're saying is, ultimately, kailangan yung proseso sa House of Representatives will try to find out the truth because we're talking about the second highest official of the land.
Attorney, isa pang narrative na naririnig natin, waste of time. Kasi siyam lang naman ang kailangan, acquitted na. Ang tanong ko po sa inyo, sa lawyer that you are, of course, alam natin yung bank secrecy law, ang exemption, isa sa exemption ay yung impeachment. Yan po bang makukuhang facts dyan sa House of Representatives? Yan po ba'y pwedeng gamitin na pagkasampang kaso via ombudsman?
Ako pa bilang pong abogado ng mahigit isang dekada na who was always devoted part of my career, life and resources to public accountability and human rights. Naniwala po ako na never waste of time ang public accountability. pagdating po sa accountability, never po yung waste of time. No? So, tandaan po natin ang konteksto nito, ha? Gusto ko lang pong ipaalala sa inyong lahat. No? It is our group's belief that Sara Duterte has escaped accountability for far too long. The Dutertes have escaped accountability for far too long. Ngayon lang nga po ako nakakita ng isang abogado na nanampal na ng sheriff na ini-execute lang ang isang court order, pinagsusuntok before national television, unscathed. Unscathed. Ngayon lang rin ako nakakita na grabe ang mga aligasyon na pinagpatuloy niya ang malawakang patayan sa Davao through the Davao Death Squad. Batay na rin sa testimonya ni Arthur Las Cañas, unscathed. Ilang beses na sila sinubukang imbestigahan, unscathed. Lagi sila nakaka-escape ng accountability, no? At kung sasabihin nating waste of time na naman yan, again, they will escape accountability. Grabe yung mga alegasyon kung paano nila nilaro yung procurement sa DepEd, ng procurement ng mga laptops. Grabe yung mga, at the time na meron tayong krisis sa edukasyon. Grabe yung mga alegasyon na yon, no? Grabe yung alegasyon ng chinichirya yung pera ng taong bayan sa confidential funds. Nag-imbento ng mga pangalan, pare-pareho ang pumirma ng mga vouchers. Pero, again, magiging waste of time ba yun pagdating doon sa pag-i-inquire ng pera ng taong bayan? Accountability is never a waste of time, especially when we're talking about the highest officials of the land, but in particular, the Dutertes who have always escaped accountability, including Sara Duterte. Hindi na pwede yung nananapak sa sheriff ng korte sa harapan ng publiko, pero unscathed. Abogado pa rin. Yung iba, may sasabihin ka lang na hindi magustuhan ng korte, pwede ka masuspende, pwede kang madisbar. Pero ito, nananapak before the Filipino people ng officer of the court, unscathed. And I am alarmed that we allow such kind of impunity in this country. It's high time that we hold Sara Duterte into account for all her transgressions in this country.
Okay, tanungin naman natin si Jimmy Regalario on
Kasi
the same note.
KM siya eh. Isa sa reason kasi ng iba, makakasira daw sa ekonomiya yung gulong nalilikha ng politika. Iyo, nakilala ko si Ka Jimmy sa KME pa eh. Kahapon. Hindi ba sa amin dekada eh. Anong posisyon rito sa impeachment issues na to?
Hindi, ang ano ko niya kasi, they're trying to put up a people's tribunal na itatry si VP Sara before the court of public opinion. Ano yung, sino itong mga kasama niyo dito?
Yan, binabalak na pinag-isapan na namin sa KME. Kasama sila yung ilang obispo, no, at mga kaparian ng ilang kongregasyon na magtayo ng parang people's counterpart na people's court na habang nagsasagawa ng pagdinig doon sa loob ng Senado, magtatayo kami ng people's court doon maski na outside the gate eh. Now, if they will allow us doon sa loob ng gate, the better, no? Kakausapin ko si Senate President Tito Soto na kung pwede kaming doon man lang sa may mga puno, no, na hindi mainit. At kung ano yung mga ebidensyang dadalhin doon sa Senado, kukuha kami ng kopya o doon sa pamamaraang pwede namin gawin, ay ipipresent din namin doon sa People's Court o Hukumang Bayan, no? At sabay ito, no, nagagawin habang nagdidinig sila doon sa loob ng Senado. Kaya lang, kaibahan ng gagawin namin, represented yung mga sektor ng mamamayan at may mass mobilization. Na ibig sabihin, may mga tao talagang makikinig doon sa labas. At ano man ang marating ng aming paghuhukom, kung contradictory man to, no, contrary doon sa nagiging takbo doon sa Senado, yun yung magiging usaping igigiit namin upang liwanagin sa sambayanan. Kaya I think yun na yung plano at pipilitin naming makakuha din ng mga dating mga justices, no? At isang Chief Justice at isang Administrative Court Justice.
Sereno siguro, pwede dyan. Sereno.
Pwede rin. No? Pwede si Sereno, no? Si Jay Puno, o si Justice Elepanyo, no? At magiging bahagi din sila ng proceedings doon sa People's Court. Kaya ito, magiging magiging, kung mali kami, di sasabihin ng Senado, mali kayo. Pero pag mali naman sila, magmo-mobilize kami para sabihin mali kayo, no? So may balance.
Pero you have to be prepared na sagutin yung allegation na para kayong kangaroo court o yung propaganda lang.
Hindi, kung itatanong yung ganyan tanong, karapatan natin yun na parang isang uri ng pagbabantay na hindi natutulog yung tao doon sa nangyayari sa Senado. Kaya kung walang resoluteness yung Senado, at least may mga maglalahad pa rin ng mga ebidensya at maglalahad ng mga katotohanan doon sa People's Court.
Okay.
Kailan magsisimula yun? Kailan nyo ilulunsad? Parang hindi ko narinig.
Isasabay namin doon sa hearing. Kung nag-umpisa sila sa Senado, mag-uumpisa rin kami.
So at least mga 2 months pa yun. Di ba yung hearings ng Committee on Justice 2 months until April ba?
Nobody knows. Okay. May tanong natin kasama sa media. Raise your hands or raise your voice. Sa impeachment. Okay. Attorney, bago sila magtanong, meron ba kayong mga surprise witness na dadalhin sa House? Or surprise documents?
Hindi naman kailangan ng surprise, di ba? Malinaw naman yung mga alegasyon. Merong mga witnesses, hindi sila surprise. No? Kasi lahat naman ito ay may mga basehan. No? Ini-expect naman natin na based on doon sa mga alegasyon, which are the ultimate facts, by the way, contained in the impeachment complaint, merong evidentiary facts na ilalabas. Diyan yung, siyempre, ipapasampina natin yung, we intend na masampina yung bank officers, for example, para mailabas. Because ang nakalagay naman po sa batas, ang exception po sa bank secrecy law, impeachment proceedings. Hindi po ba? So, ibig sabihin, pagka pinasampina sila, dala-dala nila yung bank records, makikita natin yung bank records. Makikita rin natin, of course, no, we expect na makikita natin yung mga personalities as well na malay mo, 'di ba? Yung doon sa pagkontrata niya ng assassin, nangontrata na ba siya o hindi? Merong mga intelligence report na diyan kung sino yung kinontrata, paano kinontrata, parte po yan ng evidentiary fact. Pero yung ultimate fact po, malinaw na malinaw, kahit ano pa pong panglalanse ng kampo ni Sara Duterte, malinaw ang ultimate fact dito. Yung allegation na kailangang i-prove.
Okay.
Yung mga evidentiary fact, ilalabas po yan ng impeachment.
Okay. Bank records. Several months ago, may interview kaming mga bank officials. Ang sabi nila, ang law, minamandate lang sila 10 taon na mag-keep ng records dun sa kanilang microfilm, sa kanilang microfilm. Saan po kukuha ng record pa ngayon na available? Kasi more than 10 years na yung naunang ibinulgar ni then Senator Antonio Trillanes na bilyong-bilyong perang umiikot dun sa mga Duterte sa bangko.
Buhay pa po yung bank account, ha? Meron pa rin po mga unexplainable recently doon, di ba? Na mga transactions, hindi lang po yung nakaraang 10 years. Buhay pa po yung joint bank account nila. Una. Pangalawa, nandiyan pa rin naman po yung Anti-Money Laundering Council report. At pangatlo, kahit yun lang ang requirement ng batas, supposedly sa microfiche ng mga bangko, hindi ibig sabihin yan, destroyed na yung records. Yun lang yung requirement ng law. So it does not mean that it has not been preserved. But ang sa amin pong palagay, even yung the past 10 years already contains so much explosive, incriminating transactions that they cannot explain. Paano 2 billion ang total bank transactions? Wala namang supposedly, di ba? Simple yan, nakakulambu yan. Kumakain nga yan ng daing, di ba? Paano? Wala namang ibang negosyo yung mga yan. So bakit ganun kalalaki yung pera doon? In fact, yung ilang transactions doon sa aking pagkakakita, no, na kailangan makumpirma ng actual records, merong mga 4 o 5 withdrawal ng 20 million batay doon sa doon ng lahat ng mga anak ng mga Duterte. 20 million each. Saan nakuha yung pera na to? Saan ang galing ang pera na ito? Kahit pagsabasarahin ng sweldo nila will not be sufficient. So they will have a hard time explaining this, which is why they will do whatever it takes. Ito na, winawarningan ko na yung publiko, na merong malaking mga diversionary tactic yang mga Duterte. They will take advantage of the economic situation because of the war in Iran, in Israel and the United States, and the oil price hike o yung pagtaas ng petrolyo. Iti-take advantage lahat yan. Ngayon, dahilan sa ayaw nilang mabuksan ang bank accounts, ayaw nilang maisalang ang mga witnesses, at kaya in-announce ni Sara Duterte na nagtatakbo siya presidente, dalawang bagay. Una, para sabihin niyang pinupolitika lang ako, lahat ito politika labang, pero hindi niya sasagutin. Hindi niya sasagutin because never kayang sagutin ni Sara Duterte ang lahat ng mga aligasyon kasi totoo itong mga ito. So magda-divert. So yung una, kaya siya tumakbo. Pangalawa, para takutin yung mga House members at mga senador na pag nagpresidente ako at mayari kayo sa akin. Kaya wag nyo nang don't cross my line. Yun naman yung rason eh. And akala nila brilliant yung mga political advisors nila in actually asking her or making her declare. We don't think so.
Okay. Attorney, assuming for the sake of discussion, proven, halimbawa na talagang nag-withdraw ng 20 million several times, kinakailangan pa bang mapatunayan na sa masama ng galing o kanino nang galing yung winidraw halagang yon at na-deposito o sapat na yon na mayroong napatunayang totoo yung deposito yon para maging, well, impeachable na yung, at least yung parte nyo ng akusasyon.
Batay po sa batas to ha, batas. Pag merong kayong wealth, tapos public officer kayo, and you cannot explain it, that is presumed to be ill-gotten. And in fact, the OSG can commence for future proceedings. So, the moment na napatunayan lahat ng mga pera na ito, the burden of evidence shifts on Sara Duterte to prove that these were legitimately acquired. If she cannot prove, sufficient na po iyon. So, the mere existence of such kinds of transactions without proper explanation from Sara Duterte is already enough for her to be convicted and to be removed from office. Hindi niya ma-explain eh. Ano yun? Bigay na lang ng langit. Pero kailangan niya para i-declare yun sa salin niya. Kahit bigay ng langit. Ba't hindi niya dinedeclare? Kaya nga ipapakita rin yung mga salin niya throughout the years. These are real damning evidence. At mga kaibigan, para po sa publiko, ang tingnan lang po natin, ebidensya, ebidensya, ebidensya. Kahit ano po ang politics ninyo, kahit po sinusuportahan niyo po si Sara Duterte, tingnan po natin ang ebidensya, ebidensya, ebidensya. Because isa lang yung ultimate yung bansa natin. And our loyalty has to be to the flag, to the nation, not a single personality. Ebidensya, ebidensya, ebidensya.
Help us understand, Attorney. While it is true na bahagi ng exemption yung impeachment sa pagbubukas ng mga accounts, at this early, marami nagsasabi na parang legally debatable yung konteksto na yon dahil parang ang proseso ng impeachment ay hindi naman tumutukoy doon sa proseso sa House kundi doon sa actual trial. Tama bang kaisipan nito, Attorney?
Well, sasabihin ko nga legally debatable lahat pag ito ka sa kampo ng Sara Duterte kasi na-divert niya yung issue eh. Lahat ng mga technicalidad ibabato niya, pero sa akin kasi yung pagbato niya ng technicalidad na takot siyang buksan pa lang ng House of Representatives yung mga yung mga bank accounts niya is already a damning enough. Ibig sabihin, kitang-kita sa action pa lang may tinatago. Tama? Kasi sabi nga nila, ulitin ko lang, kung wala ka namang tinatago, bakit ayaw mong buksan? Di ba ganyan na nangyari sa EDSA 2? Ayaw nilang buksan yung mga envelope na galit ng sambayan ng Pilipino, pumunta sa EDSA, bumagsak si Era Estrada. Ngayon, ayaw na naman nilang buksan, no? Pero legally, no, as a lawyer, di ba ang Korte Suprema nagsabi na dapat may proceeding sa baba? Hindi lang doon sa trial. So, ibig sabihin, part and parcel po yung ginagawa ng Committee on Justice, part and parcel po yan ng entire impeachment proceedings. No less than the Supreme Court said that due process must be accorded to Sara Duterte doon pa lang po sa impeachment committee, sa Committee on Justice. Hindi sa trial. Dati nga po ang stand namin, di ba? Kami po ang mga complainants rin before, no? Isa po ako sa mga abogado doon sa complainants before last year. Di ba ang sabi namin, ang due process nandoon sa Senate. Ngayon sabi ng Supreme Court sa baba, o di sundin natin Supreme Court sa baba, which means that logically, it's part and parcel of the entire impeachment process, batay na rin po sa pronouncements ng Korte Suprema. So sa amin pong palagay, pwedeng-pwede pong isabina ng Committee on Justice ang mga bank records na to as part and parcel of the impeachment proceedings.
May question yata sa... Sige.
Sir Powell, you're retired Air Force, right? And then
Correct.
you're the founder and executive director of Sea Light Foundation.
That's correct.
What is your purpose to establish Sea Light, and what is your motive to establish Sea Light?
Thank you for the question. And by the way, just so I can say this one more time for the record, whatever my colleagues on my left or right have
Well,
said...
he came late. He came late. That's why.
It's okay. It's okay. Just for the record, Sea Light, as a U.S.-based foundation, does not take any position whatsoever on Philippine domestic politics. Just in case this comes up. So just because I'm sitting here doesn't mean I'm associated with all of the things that are said around me. We are very careful to stay out of Philippine domestic politics. Sea Light was founded in 2023 on the recognition that there were activities taking place at sea, which we refer to as gray zone activities, that the public was not aware of, and that governments, by and large, are poorly equipped to inform the public of. And so we believe that if those activities received public awareness, that the perpetrators of those activities, and in particular we're thinking of the People's Republic of China, can be held accountable for what is actually happening. So when we're talking about maritime aggression, when we're talking about things like blocking and swarming and ramming and all of those things that happen that are meant to coerce or intimidate or bully another country or its people, that those things should be exposed to public scrutiny. And so we began tracking ships, getting access to publicly and commercially available satellite imagery in order to put those things directly into the public space. So that was the purpose of establishing Sea Light.
How much your fund in funding that?
Yeah, not very much. So I would say in our bank account right now we have just over $10,000, which is all privately donated. So it comes from people who share our passion in this area. Sea Light itself is run entirely by volunteers who are not paid, including myself. My only personal funding comes from my military pension from my 35 years in the U.S. military. And my disability check. So that's where my personal funds come from. Now that doesn't mean that we won't seek more funding in the future, and in fact we are. But at present, we are an entirely volunteer-run organization.
That's my question. Is that your personal, or there is behind that? Is your personal?
Sorry, repeat your question another way.
Personal funding, or there's other sponsors?
So the people who have actually given us money are private individuals. Up until now, I think there's actually one company that has given us some money, about $10,000. But everybody else is a private individual, so there's been nothing that's come from any government. And actually, I will say, on balance, Sea Light has cost me more money than I have taken in. So I've received no salary for Sea Light.
Okay, so Director, if that guy wants to donate, he can
Yes.
donate.
Oh, sure, yeah. Sure, yeah. Go ahead. Just leave it here on the table. That'd be fine.
Please give me the bank account. I will donate. You are doing a lot of good in this country.
I have my last question for Mr. Powell. Using your framework, sir, what does success look like in the West Philippine Sea?
Yeah. So I think it essentially looks like a long-term coordinated pushback against maritime hegemony, against an imperialist foreign power that seeks to dominate more than just its own legitimate seas, those that granted under international law, and seeks to establish a new law that is might makes right. Revert to the international law that has served us essentially since the end of World War II, and especially since the advent of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So that would be what long-term success looks like, at least developing a consensus that that is what ought to happen, and that those who try to overthrow that law should be held accountable.
For attorney, refresh our memory kasi parang nakadalawang Chief Justice tayo ng issue ay SALN, ano? So, dun ba sa SALN may magsushoot sa balde sa akusasyon ninyo?
Meron, definitely, no? Kasi, di ba, yung kay Corona, yan yung natanggal before, di ba? Sa co-warrant to, wala daw kasing SALN, no? Pero tandaan rin natin, ha, na hindi lang yung root is yung doon sa pagsampina ng mga bank records. Tandaan natin na si Sara Duterte, doon na-submit po siya ng kanyang SALN. Merong waiver sa baba, ha? At ang nakalagay ay authorize the ombudsman to verify whether whether tama yung mga nakalagay doon, including opening of bank records. So, pwede rin ang isampina is the ombudsman. In fact, the ombudsman can conduct an investigation motu proprio or upon complaint to verify kung tama yung mga nakalagay sa SALN niya, including the power to open the bank accounts because of the waiver signed by Sara Duterte. Hindi po talaga nagtutugma, itaga nyo po sa bato at wala po tayong makukuha kahit dito kung hindi public accountability lamang. Yung kanyang declaration sa SALN at yung unexplainable flow of cash sa bank account nila ni Rodrigo Duterte. At kung hindi totoo ang sinasabi ko at ang sinasabi ng mga impeachment complainants, ilabas mo yung bank records. Magtutuos tayo doon. Pero hindi niya ilalabas yan kasi totoo po na hindi magtutugma yung kanyang mga deklarasyon sa SALN at yung mga bank transactions niya.
Attorney De Leon is also involved in the ICC case against Rodrigo Duterte. Alam niyo na yung ang processes sa ICC. You're well acquainted yung processes doon. Ano yung projection mo sa mangyayari kung magtuloy sa trial ni Duterte?
Tanda natin, katatapos na ng confirmation of charges hearing. Sa panood naman po natin yun, no? Alam naman po natin lahat dito sa kwarto to whether some people may want to deny it, na malawakan talaga yung patayan na pinagdaanan ng sambayan ng Pilipino sa ilalim ni Rodrigo Duterte. Malawakan. The estimates are 12,000 to 30,000. And the reason why estimate lang yan is because we've all lost count. Tandaan niyo po lahat kayo sa media noong mga first few months, meron pang number by the numbers. Namatay, ganyan. Ilan yung in-raid, ilan yung namatay. Daily, dati, hanggang yung lahat kayo lost count. Ganon po karami ang pinatay. And according to to studies, even more than 100 definitely, nakalimutan ko lang 125 o 135 minors were killed during the bloody drug war, no? Including sila Kian De Los Santos. Ako po, ang kwento ko personal is, I quit my old law firm, one of the largest, one of the bigger ones in Makati, because of what happened to Kian De Los Santos. No? I visited his wake, paid my respects as an anonymous private person. Hindi nila alam, nag-shorts lang ako, nag-t-shirt ako dahil pinatay si Kian De Los Santos. Ang bottom line, marami pong pinatay sa Pilipinas and malakas po ang ebidensya ng prosecution. So, ang aking fearless forecast is this will proceed to trial. At ang sabi nga nila, malakas naman daw yung depensa nila Wala naman daw kinalaman si Rodrigo Duterte doon di ba? Doon sila sa trial magpaliwanag. But definitely, given the quantum of evidence we have right now, I think it will proceed to trial.
Attorney, balik tayo dun sa impeachment. Parang replay na lang sa marami sa atin yung pagkakarinig dun sa reply od katelam. Dahil nagamit na ito ng isang taon at ngayon ginagamit na naman. Is this a prelude na sooner rather than later, the Vice President's camp would go to the Supreme Court in a bid to prevent this hearing from happening?
Tandaan ninyo master ang mga Duterte sa pag-divert, master ang mga Duterte sa pag-iwas, pero hindi sila master sa pag-explain. Kasi hindi nila kaya. No? So, they will exhaust all remedies, both legal and otherwise. Ang pinakamalaki is makikita ninyo po kung meron kayong mga monitoring, activated na yung mga trolls, overtime yan, maglalabas ng malaki-malaking pera at i-maximize yung makinarya para sabihin walang ebidensya. No? And then pupunta sila sa lahat ng mga avenues, including possibly going to the Supreme Court. Our prayer, no, aming appeal sa Supreme Court is, these are duly elected representatives of the people who is tasked by the Constitution to handle impeachment. That is their province, and as much as possible, the Supreme Court should not meddle with this constitutional process, because the one entrusted by the Constitution to handle it is the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Hindi, yung magiging impeachment trial, parang magiging bulwagan ng katotohanan niya na hindi nila pwedeng gamitin yung ibang institusyon para ma-delay. Kagaya nung nag-uusap pa lang dun sa paghingi ng waiver, di ba? Para mabuksan yung bank account. Dun sa impeachment trial, mabubuksan yun nang hindi kailangang may waiver, no? Pangalawa, lahat ng mga gustong itanong, no, na alam naman nating hindi sinasagot ng tama at hindi direkta ang tinatanong, ay pwedeng ipuwersa na sagutin. At hindi nila pwedeng gamitin yung mga provision na hindi pwedeng ano ba yan, yung itong money laundering council, no? Yung AMLAC, na pwede rin pabuksan lahat ng mga dokumento na dapat malaman ng tao. So, yan yung napakahalagang punto na dapat malaman ng sambayanan. Malalaman dyan sa impeachment proceedings na yan.
May tanong po sa TV5.
To Attorney Dino din po. Ako po si JC from TV5. Sir, tama po, no? Kayo po yung counsel ng second impeachment complaint at part po kayo ng Tindig Pilipinas. Correct. Alright. Sir, yun pong camp ni VP Sara, si Attorney Mike Powano, he already confirmed na they received the invitation to attend the March 25 hearing. But there's no categorical statement if the Vice President will really personally attend. In your own opinion, dapat po bang humarap si VP Sara sa pagdinig next week?
Si VP Sara, again, will have to explain. Ang tandaan po natin ang constitutional provision is constitutional provision on accountability. Mag-explain ka. Ang tanong ko po is, bakit ba allergic si Sara Duterte matanong? At bakit ba allergic si Sara Duterte na sumagot sa mga tanong? Nadatanong siya, nagagalit siya. Tinatanong siya dati sa mga hearings, even in her budget, nagagalit siya. Magto-throw siya ng fit, magtatantrums doon na parang spoiled brat, no? So, ang fearless forecast ko, hindi siya attend. Pero kung attend siya, palagay ko hindi niya sasagutin yung mga tanong. She will again throw an attitude out there and claim that this is all political. So, kaya pupusta ako dyan. Hindi yan darating, pero kung darating siya, hindi niya sasagutin ang mga tanong. Bagkus, ililihis na naman at magagalit at sasabihin politika lamang ito.
Pero sa inyo pong opinion, dapat po siyang humarap doon?
Duty bound siya, constitutional process to eh. Alam niyo po, sa atin po, again regardless of the personalities, our loyalty has to be the flag to this nation and the Constitution. And yung Constitution po, sinasabi, this is a sacred process. At kailangan galangin ni Sara Duterte ang mga institusyon, including the House of Representatives, including eventually the Senate, and kailangan niyang sagutin sa saligang batas. At sabi sa saligang batas, accountability ito, kailangan mag-explain siya.
Okay. To Sir Jimmy. Sir, para lang din po malinaw, sino yung bubuo doon sa pinaplano na People's Court? Is it civil society groups, mga kaparian? Sino po?
Mga clergy and the academy, saka yung mga ilang retiradong mga chief justices. At kung makakarating sila, para kumpleto yung yung paglalahad ng mga dapat na malaman ng tao.
Attorney, yung impeachment ay para sa impeachable official. Yung bang pagiging impeachable official at saka yung pag-alis ng bank secrecy law batay sa proseso ng impeachment, yun ba'y mawawala kapag ka yung impeachable official na ini-impeach ay hindi na official kapag nag-resign?
Ang submission po namin dito ng marami rin po mga legal experts nagsasabi nito ay hindi, no? Kasi yung resignation, ang dalawa po kasi ang purpose ng ng impeachment, to remove from office and to impose perpetual disqualification from office. So kahit po may removal, ang judgment can also impose perpetual disqualification from office. Ibig sabihin, just because natanggal na, does not render the second purpose of impeachment moot and academic, which is to determine whether it is proper to impose perpetual disqualification from office. Ang ibig sabihin lang po nun, hindi na pwedeng tumakbo at magserbisyo publiko kasi nga unfit. Tandaan po natin na ang impeachment is an assessment of the fitness of character of that person to remain in office and to seek further office someday. So yung issue po ng perpetual absolute disqualification, hindi po kasi yan nagagamot just because nag-resign na yung tao.
Okay po. Pardon, may kakulitan. Pwede namang magamit talaga sa ombudsman yung makukuha. Kung magre-resign ang isang impeachable official at pwedeng ipagpatuloy ang impeachment, pwede namang ma-acquit siya doon sa Senado. Ang tanong ko po sa inyo, yun bang mga naggamit ng mga, o lumabas ng mga ebidensya doon, pwede bang gamitin para magsampa ng kasong ombudsman sa nag-resign ng opisyal?
Definitely, no? Tandaan po natin na ang immunity lang po, ang actually debatable ang immunity ng Vice President from suit. Pero let's be generous to the legal theory na meron siyang immunity from suit. Ibig sabihin, hindi siya pwede kasuhan ng plunder, etc. Corrupt, di ba? Parang presidente kasi impeachable official rin siya. Pag nag-resign na po siya, lahat po ng mga ebidensya nito, duty bound ang ombudsman to actually institute criminal charges and lahat po ng mga pwede pang i-file kung the evidence say malakas. Ang sabi, kung ibig sabihin, kung based sa assessment ng ombudsman is there's reasonable certainty of conviction, duty-bound ang ombudsman na gamitin itong mga ebidensya nito. So, hindi lamang pwede, duty, kung sakasakaling naabot ang quantum of evidence required.
So, pwede pa rin pumasok yung kaparusahan o pananagutan na perpetual disqualification ng nag-resign na official via ombudsman.
Maaari po rin po yan, no? Pero hindi rin po precluded na i-assert ng impeachment court ang kanilang jurisdiction to also impose that. In other words, magkaiba po ang sources of mandate and jurisdiction ng Senate as an impeachment court kung magpapatuloy ang trial court at ang ombudsman. Yung ombudsman po ang Ombudsman Act, no? Yung trial court po yung Senado po as the High Court of Impeachment gets its mandate from the Constitution. So, pwede silang simultaneously gumalaw.
Okay. So, kung magre-resign ng Vice Presidente, hindi mawawala kanyang accountability. Ang mawawala lamang ay yung pondo ng Vice Presidential Security Group.
Hindi na siya Vice President, yun lamang. Pero pwede ba yun? Ganun lang ba kadali yun sa bansang ito? Resign na ako, wala na akong pananagutan? Hindi po ganun yun. Kahit nga yung mga empleyado, di ba? Mag-resign kayo, pag under investigation kayo, pwede kayo file ng criminal action tsaka civil action. Pwede bang yung opisyal ng bansa na empleyado nating lahat, maka-escape sa pananagutan? Hindi dapat.
Alam po naman natin ang proseso ng batas sa atin. I'm referring kung mag-via ombudsman, yung kasong pwedeng parusahan ng perpetual disqualification, hindi naman natatapos yan sa loob ng 10 taon eh. Kadalasan, 10 taon. Paano kung mag-file siya ng candidacy? Gaya ng kanyang, as your term, is threatened.
Oo. Dapat sa akin, and we have to take a look at this as one country, no? Kaya nawiwili yung mga opisyal, di ba? Hindi na natatakot sa pananagutan. Matagal pa naman yan. In the meantime, kunin ko muna yung kapangyarihan. Tama? No? So dapat mas mabilis talaga yung proseso, no? Pero that will be the move of Sara Duterte. That's why she declared already. She threatened already that she will run, no? Or she's threatening to become the president of the Philippines in 2028. Yan ay pananakot sa lahat ng mga congressman ngayon na pag bumoto kayo at ako nanalo, yari kayo, no? Kaya nga ang tanong, matatapang ba ang ating mga congressman? 215 silang pumirma last time. Meron bang mga maduduwag? Pareho lang yung ebidensya eh. Sabi nila last year, oo eh. Hindi naman nagbago yung mga ebidensya eh. Wala naman na-exonerate eh. Ang tanong, matatapang po ba ang mga congressman? At pipirma po ba sila ulit o maduduwag because Sara Duterte is threatening to become the 2028 president? That is a clear question that only the congressmen who signed will be able to answer.
Hindi ko po alam kung gusto niyo pag tinanong ko, pero pwede hindi sagutin. Kasi parang may pagdududa naman lahat eh. May duda sa ilang congressman, may duda sa mga senador. Ang pwede pong makapagpa-delay dito, gaya nung nakaraang taon, ay Supreme Court. Ay, abogado kayo, ayoko ng diretsyo ng tanong. Ganito na lang po. Fresh pa kaya sa memory ng mga mahistrado na sila'y naging mahigpit sa pagkapatupad ng issue ng SALN at kinuwaranto nga nila ang kanilang Chief Justice. Yung kayang the same higpit, the same barometer, the same timbangan ay gagamitin pagdating sa issue ng SALN ng pangalawang Pangulo.
No, I'm a lawyer, no? And ibig sabihin po yan, sabi nyo nga kanina, may, ang akin pong adherence ay sa hustisya at sa rule of law. And part of parcel of that is to acknowledge that the Supreme Court is an imperfect human institution. Nagkakamali po ang Korte Suprema. Okay? Kahit 15 pa po ang bumoto dyan, nagkakamali po ang Korte Suprema. In fact, meron na po dating kaso, no, na 15-0, nireverse rin nila yung sarili nila, 15-0. So nagkakamali po ang Supreme Court. At sa akin pong most humble submission as a continuing student of the law, malaki pong pagkakamali yung nangyari doon sa kaso last year because of several reasons. Apart from the fact na parang retroactive yung ginawa doon sa procedural rules, no? Na hindi fundamental principle ng batas, naging overly restrictive, hindi binigyang buhay yung political will ng co-equal branch na House of Representatives na ma-impeach, parang hindi nirespeto yung boto ng isang co-equal branch. And finally, hindi po talaga sa aking pag-aaral ng saligang batas, province ng Supreme Court ang impeachment proceedings. Ang Supreme Court po, nakuha niyang kapangyarihan niya sa saligang batas. Because the saligang batas, our Constitution is the sovereign will of the people. Ito po ang pinakamataas na konstitusyon. Doon po nang nakalagay ang kapangyarihan ng lehislatibo, Supreme Court at Executive. At sinabi po ng saligang batas, ito po ay province ng House of Representatives at Senate. So the Supreme Court should not have should have not gone out of its lane, in my humble opinion, in that particular respect. Pero having said that, the Supreme Court is also, sabi nila, diba, is the final arbiter of the law given its judicial review powers. Pero hindi ibig sabihin po hindi sila nagkakamali.
Yan yung isang punto ng pangangailangan ng pakikialam ng tao. Yung mass movement, yung follow through. Ano man ang mangyari dyan sa impeachment? Kasi dalawang bagay yung hinahabol dyan, removal from office at saka yung perpetual disqualification. No? At kung hindi man matupad, yung mga desisyon na yan, may follow through na manggagaling sa tao mismo. At kung meron mang erring official na magja-juggle ng mga nangyayari at maiba yung mga desisyon o may mga violation dun sa mga desisyon na ganap o nagawa na, may taong handang ituloy ang pagmamasid, yung patuloy na pagmamanman at siguraduhin matupad yung mga tagumpay na nakuha dun sa impeachment proceedings.
I have a question for Director Powell.
You're starting to feel sorry for me just sitting here all by myself.
What's the future of Philippine alliances and friendship? Because as I see it, we have a mutual defense treaty with US, and in ASEAN, we have a muted friendship. They cannot speak anything against China. And in European, they are NATO, no action, talk only. And Japan, we are similarly situated. We have, pardon my phrase, common enemy. Who will be the most reliable in times of war between these groupings of countries?
Well, so, let's start with ASEAN. ASEAN is just not well situated to be a security organization against a threat like China. So I am well known, or at least well expressed, to be a pessimist when it comes to having a South China Sea Code of Conduct. I don't foresee one happening in 2026 or 2027 or any time in my lifetime. I believe that this is just something that is outside the capabilities of ASEAN to come up with. And it doesn't mean that ASEAN does not have its uses. I think ASEAN can be very effective at many things. This is just not one of them. So I do think the Philippines has done a very good job of building a coalition among the United States and its allies and like-minded nations from around the region, and even extra-regional. So, you've even seen countries like India come out and support the arbitral award and those kinds of things. So you are seeing a coalescence of interest. There have been those in the United States who have advocated for something like an Asian NATO. I think that's a very hard thing to do. NATO is a very unique entity, a very unique organization in human history, so building something like it is very difficult. But there have been strides made in that direction, and I see more and more coalescence around a common vision for what, sort of a mutual defense, if not a treaty, but an understanding amongst like-minded states, especially as we begin to look at sort of this issue of who is in the first island chain outside of the East China Sea, South China Sea, coming down from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. You're definitely seeing a very strong coalescence of interest around looking at ways that they can support one another. So it's short of a mutual defense treaty, but there is a lot of mutual defense activity happening among those nations.
Can I quickly pitch in on that? No, the future of our Philippine alliances will also largely depend on who our political leaders are. In the past 4 or 5 years after Duterte, we've strengthened a lot of our alliances, including doing joint patrols with Australia. We bought BrahMos missiles from India. We've secured new fighter jets from Korea. We're improving our minimum credible defense posture. And basically, we're engaging more with other countries. Why? Perhaps because even President Marcos was a keynote speaker in the Shangri-La Conference, which is Asia's primary conference with respect to defense. No, that means that there is some sort of respect towards our head of state and our defense posture. But that will largely also change depending on the behavior of the would-be chief executive come 2028. And commander-in-chief, no? If we will have once again an embarrassing president who curses heads of state around, who seems to be an outcast during international conferences para nakakahiya, no? At ayaw kausapin ng mga ibang heads of state, then it will be difficult for us to navigate international relations once again. And if we have somebody who's gravely aligned with Beijing once again, then therefore, all the alliances that we have right now will also be second-guessed and will be weakened. So the bottom line is, if you're asking about the prospect of our alliances, again, it will largely depend. Will we elect somebody who's Team China or Team Pilipinas? No, I think we have to elect somebody who takes a look at our national interests over and above their loyalty to Beijing.
Great alliances were built upon hostility against somebody. Nakikita niyo ba na magkakaroon ng alliance ang Philippines, Japan, India, and Vietnam, and Taiwan? Because they have a very, very common enemy.
Nakikita ko nag-i-improve definitely, no? Meron na yatang status of forces agreement as well with other nations, not just with I think Australia, di ba? So hindi lang America. So the Quad, I think we're now engaging with them heavily. Again, as I've mentioned, kaya nga nagka-direct flight, di ba, from New Delhi to the Philippines kasi kumuha tayo ng ating missiles, di ba? Ng Bravos missiles, no? So, we will continue to engage with like-minded nations who stand for democracy, who stand for the rule of law, who stand for freedom of navigation in the West Philippine Sea for so long as our political leadership will be upholding these principles. But as you've seen, we were the ones who had the audacity, the guts, the bravery, the courage to sue China before the Permanent Court of Arbitration. No one does that. That was during Pinoy's administration. But all of a sudden, in the same breath, not 1 year after we've secured that victory, which is hailed by the international community, tayo nagsasabing, use this piece of paper. So things can change, and the future of our alliances depend on who we elect and whether or not they will continue these principles. Or, again, magfo-fall ba tayo dun sa elite capture strategy ng Beijing? Tandaan natin, Beijing is using malign influence. And they will be heavily involved in 2028. And they will, of course, support candidates as they've done in other countries. And question, and we have to be very critical about this, sino ba yung sinusuportahan nila? Sino ba yung pinafund nila? Para mas mura na ang isang fighter jet is around how much? $100 million. 5 billion, baka you can win Philippine elections. Mas mura. Kaya nga, elite co-optation ang strategy ng China. Para sa China, balance sheet lang yan. Bakit ako makikipaggera? Mas mura to ang elite co-optation at bilhin itong mga leaders ng Pilipinas. So we have to be very, very critical as to who we will elect in 2028.
Ay, walang tanong para sa inyo, attorney. Medyo debatable, pero may naniniwalang tagumpay yung red tagging para ma-neutralize ang communist insurgency sa Pilipinas. Is it high time na magkaroon din ng similar tagging kung sino yung itinuturing yung pro-China ng mga politiko?
Yung red tagging, never debatable, di ba? Kasi para sa akin, saka na human rights lawyer ako, no? It's just simply wrong. Go to court. Go to court. Hindi mo dapat inaatake yung mga perceive mo na human rights defenders or whatever, or komunista. And in fact, being a member of the Communist Party is not a criminal in this country. Pero, criminal para sa akin at pinakamalaking atake sa national interest at sa ating bansa yung mga traidor. So tama po, sa akin nga, tinatawag ko na silang senador. Diba? Si Rodanto Marcoleta, si Alan Peter Cayetano, si Robin Hood Padilla, si Amy Marcos, si Bongo. Diba? Kasama yan. So yung mga senador na yan who are more Beijing aligned and who, by the way, never condemned the aggression of China in the West Philippine Sea. Kinakawawa na yung ating mga members of the Philippine Navy, Bureau of Fisheries, di ba? And Aquatic Resources. Naputulan na ng daliri yung isang Navy. Tapos, walang sinasabi, walang condemnation. In fact, doon nasa resolution nga, yung pinag-uusapan nyo na sa West Philippine Sea, sila pa nag-oppose. Ito nga si Alan Peter Cayetano, sinabi pa, we have to be diplomatic. Pero nung nagmumura-mura si Rodrigo Duterte, nung Foreign Affairs Secretary siya, against the head of state of a treaty ally, against the Pope, parang wala kang marinig na dapat diplomatic tayo, All of a sudden, gusto diplomatic. Ayaw ng strong language against an aggressor. My question is, sino bang aggressor dito? Hindi ba sila ang aggressor? Bakit tayo pa yung, hindi, wag tayo magsalita kasi we have to be diplomatic. Diplomacy na nga lang is our greatest single weapon. Ayaw nyo pa magsalita. Hindi nga tayo kasing lakas ng armed forces nila. So diplomacy, for me, the proper exercise of diplomacy is to document it, which is what they're doing in the Transparency Initiative, and to speak against the abuses, the oppression, and the excesses of China in the West Philippine Sea.
I want to ask, earlier you said na you're convinced na magtutuloy yung confirmation of charges against former President Duterte. Ano yung fearless forecast mo sa kung matuloy yung trial proper sa ICC? Sigurado bang makukonvict siya, na?
Alam niyo po, ang pinagkaiba po ng ICC, unfortunately, is hindi po sila nagsasuffer sa mga political antics ng mga Duterte. Why? Because these are the highly learned, most trained jurors in the world who will take a look at the evidence with the cold neutrality of an impartial judge. No? Again, with the cold neutrality of an impartial judge. Nakita ko po ang ilan sa mga ebidensya at naramdaman naman po natin yung malawakang patayan. Alam naman po natin na hindi iyon something that is acceptable in any humane society. Alam naman po natin lahat yun eh. Kahit alam mo po yung political inclinations ninyo, yung babarilin si Kian de los Santos, yung mahigit 100 na bata ang pinatay, yung somebody will just be shot by police and sometimes hindi pa police iiwanan ng placard. Maganda yon. Hindi yun maganda eh. Alam natin na mali yun eh. Alam natin na lahat may due process. In fact, ang panaghoy ni Rodrigo Duterte nung hinuli siya, due process eh. Na pinagkait niya sa lahat ng mga pinatay under his regime. So, kung alam natin yon lahat dahil sa ating collective knowledge, dahil sa pieces of evidence, at dahil totoo naman na nangyari ang malawakang patayan na state-sponsored, state-architected, convinced po ako na makukonvict si Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court. Ang question na lang is, gaano kabilis ang proseso at sana maabutan pa siya. Pero, sa aking palagay, mananatili siya sa kulungan sa ICC.
Di
At
ba-
dapat lamang.
Di ba hanggang 30 years na yata ng ICC? Yung conviction, pag found guilty?
Pero matanda na eh. Baka pagka na-convict si Bongo, tsaka si Bato de la Rosa na nagtatago ngayon na hindi natin alam kung nasaan, ang tapang-tapang nung siya yung PNP chief, ito haharapin niya lang kanyang proceedings, hindi magawa, baka sila makalaya pa, no? Kung sakaling makonvict sila. Pero ako, I'm convinced, of course, that alam naman natin, di ba? Si Bato de la Rosa naman ang chief implementer ng war on drugs. Siya rin naman yung mga pumirma nung mga Oplan Tokhang, di ba? Oplan double barrel. Si Bongo, ang sabi ni Colonel Garma, ang nag-provide ng financing. At meron rin namang video siya na sinasabi niya kung magkano yung mga award kung sakasakaling napatay. Di ba? Video yung mga yan eh. Tapos ngayon sasabihin nila walang malawakang patay. Sino ba naman? Para naman lahat tayo dito, lahat ng nasa edad, alam natin na maraming kapwa nating Pilipino pinatay. You cannot erase that fact.
Hindi, I think yun ang isang dapat bigyan ng stress yung mga Pilipinong taksil. Kasi kung panahon ng hapon to't napapalaban tayo sa hapon, yung mga makapili, di ba? Yung bayong yun. Pero, public execution yan harapang kinukuha ng taong bayan at nililikida, no? Ngayon, itong kagaya ni Marcoleta, no? Itong si Cayetano, namamayagpag, no? At openly sinasabi yung opinion na pabor sa China, no? Pero walang public uproar eh. Palagay ko matututo yung mga yan kapag natuturing magalit yung tao. Na yung kataksilan, hindi pinababayaan dito sa Pilipinas. Kasaysayan natin yan eh. Magmula pa ng panahon ng Kastila hanggang sa kasalukuyan, pag taksil. Walang depensa yan, di ba? At dapat ina-isolate yan, nire-ridicule. At madadamay pati yung mga pamilya nila. Lalong tumatapang eh. Si Marcoleta, kalahati yata ng proceeding sa Senado. Siya nagsasalita eh. Kailangan mabigyan siya ng leksyon eh. Banata natin lahat. Di ba? Pag taksil, walang kakampi dapat na Pilipino ang mga taksil.
Balikan ko lang sa ICC, no? Ang pag-iisipan natin mabuti ito, no? And one thing na I think hindi sufficient yung national conversation about this. Alam naman natin lahat na may malawakang patayan. The ICC has already issued a warrant of arrest and I think will confirm the charges. Pero, ang tanong, where do we go from there as a nation? Tandaan natin na ang biktima ng malawakang patayan, hindi lamang yung mga nawalan ng mahal sa buhay. Kaya nga yan, crimes against humanity. It is, all of us are victims. We are never the same as one nation pagkatapos ng malawakang patayan. May mga tumigas ang puso, di ba? May mga, tayo lahat injured tayo lahat How do we move on as one nation? Ito po yung sinasabi namin sa Human Rights and People Empowerment Center na transitional justice. We have to confront what happened as one nation. Sino na ba nag-aaruga doon sa mga namatayan? Ang dami-dami nila. Kamusta na yung mga pamilya nila? Paano natin make sure as one society na hindi na mauulit itong madugong chapter ng ating kasaysayan? Wala pa tayong ganun discussion Paano natin memorialize yung mga biktima? Kasi ngayon, hindi sila memorialize, bagkus vilified pa. Tag pa as criminals. tag pa as addicts, tag pa as drug lords ng walang due process. They are vilified. How do we make sure that we properly memorialize them, compensate their families, and at the same time, may recovery na programa, hindi lamang sa pamilya, pero sa atin iisang bansa. Hindi ko pa po nakita, hindi naman po ako ganun katanda, pero we've never been as polarized about this, about a particular issue. And kailangan ma-confront po natin yun as one nation. Ito po yung sinasabag nating transitional justice mechanisms.
Okay. Attorney, ilan ba yung konkretong bilang ng mga biktima? Hanggang ngayon, hindi natin kasi kami, naging biktima ako ng martial law eh. At yung bilang, di ba, 100,000 plus yung nag-file ng ng claims. 11,000 kaming naaprubahan at na-compensate according to ranking, no? Yung 10 patay, yung 9 heavily tortured at may mga organ na nasira. Ba't yun nagawa? Etong sa namatayan ng EJK, wala, may sabi ng pulis, 6,000. Kasi kailangan mong bilangin yan dahil ang bawat isang buhay ay may katapat na hustisya. Ano mo bang, dyan, ang report?
Ang sabihin ko lang yung sa police, ang DUI, that's under investigation na nauso ng panahon ni Rodrigo Duterte, yung termino nila. Hindi po 6,000 yung 6,000 plus po, human rights, some human rights groups yon. 29,000 plus po ang DUI under the Duterte administration according to the official data of the Philippine National Police, no? So some data, biglang nababago na yan eh. Bigla nung nakita nilang, ay grabe nga, tapos nagpe-pending na yung ICC, denied na sila sa DUI. Pero maraming mga publications na sinasabi, yun yung kinote ng police, no? Tama po kayo. Part of the transitional justice initiative has to be to properly document what really happened. Bakit po? Explain ko lang mabilis. Pasensya na po kayo ha. In a transitional justice, pagkatapos po kasi na merong malawakang ang patayan or mass atrocity, ang presumption po nun ay hindi kaya ng ating ordinary justice system to actually serve justice. Bakit po? Malawakang nga yung patayan eh. Pangalawa, usually kasama po ang Estado. It's state-sponsored, which means that the ordinary criminal justice system cannot handle it because it is part of the state. At saka pangalawa, pagkasama po yung Estado, marami na po mga ebidensya dyan ang na-corrupt. Marami na po mga ebidensya dyan ang na-pollute. So, sa criminal justice system po kasi, kailangan proof beyond reasonable doubt. Tama po ba? Alam niyo naman yun, di ba? Kaya po, sa lahat po ng mga instances that a society has suffered from mass atrocity, gumagawa sila ng transitional justice mechanism. Not the ordinary justice system, but bagkus, dinodocument po nila kung sino yung mga biktima, and then at the same time, kahit walang conviction, merong proper reparations. It's not ideal kasi walang na-convict or kukunti na-convict, pero at least merong some sort of recognition dito sa mga biktima na ito. Ganyan po yung nangyari sa inyo doon sa first attempt ng Pilipinas into some sort of transitional justice. Pero naging condition po kasi yon ng government ng Switzerland. Inarang ko po doon sa aking pag-aaral. Ando po yung Prosecutor General ng Switzerland nung pinag-usapan namin to. Ang booklet po, nung pinabigay sa amin, where it all started. President Ferdinand Marcos and the ill-gotten wealth recovered from Switzerland. First time pa lang ng Switzerland magbalik ng ganong kalaking ill-gotten wealth nung panahon na yon. Ngayon, nagbabalik na sila ng marami, pero tayo po nagsimula noon, nagtingin ng lahat ng kaklasiko doon sa Georgetown sa akin. Sa inyo pala nagsimula no? Bakit? Naging kondisyon ng Switzerland na mag-allocate ng a certain portion ng binalik nila to compensate the human rights victims. So sana po, dapat meron din tayong ganong klaseng dokumentasyon.
Ang tanong nga, attorney, yung bilang at yung mga pangalan Ang laki-laki ng bilang, pero hindi ma-enumerate yung mga pangalan at kung ano ang gagawin para mabigyan ng hustisya yung bawat isa.
Correct.
Yung victim ng martial law, by the hundreds of thousands, ilista lahat
Correct.
Tapos yung yung most severe yung ang torture and incarceration, 11,000. May may monetary compensation. Sa Amerika, nag-file kami sa Hawaii. Nagkaroon din ng judgment yun. Bilang na bilang din doon. At pangalawa, lahat ng recovered loot doon sa US, every time na makaka-recover at maibebenta, yung mga victims na na-recognize sa Hawaii, nakakatanggap ng compensation. Bakit dito
So,
sa
attorney, may assignment ka.
sa extrajudicial killing, wala tayong listahan ng mga
Apo.
tao?
Oo. Yan po yung ina-advocate namin sa Human Rights and People Empowerment Center. Yun nga po yung tinatawag naming Transitional Justice Initiative. Kailangan po gumawa na tayo ng Truth Commission to investigate the war on drugs, and as much as possible document the real victims, put a name in the number, hindi yung labo-labo lang na mga statistics. And kailangan po, dahil po collective failure po natin yung malawakang patayan, hindi lang po kasalanan ni Rodrigo Duterte. We allowed it as a society, and we have to accept that as a fact. And therefore, kailangan magkaroon ng alokasyon to compensate the victims and to allow them to recover. Marami po mga anak na hindi nakakapag-aral, na wala ng mahal sa buhay, who are still traumatized. Wala kahit anong state effort to assist them. Ang meron pong effort sila, Father Flavi, mga kaparian, private sector. So yan po yung Transitional Justice Initiative na aming ina-advocate.
Sa
Human
ano
Rights
yan
and People Empowerment
state crime, no? Na presidente yung nag-order, pinatupad ng mga pulis, may mga nangamatay. So, ang dapat magbigay ng ano dyan, ng hustisya at compensation if there is, no? I think there must be. Kasi pulis yung pumatay. At yung order nang galing sa presidente, kung kailangan silang bigyan ng ng indemnity, ay dapat at mahalaga na pwede naman magkaroon niya ng budget, di ba? Kung yung kami 124,000 at yung 11,000 ang lalaki ng binigay, kung yung Hawaii, lahat ngayon hanggang ngayon tumatanggap pa ako sa Hawaii, bakit may nako-recover, ibebenta, yung proceeds, inahati ng mga human rights victims.
Sige. On that note, we'd like to end this Saturday's edition of our news forum. We'd like to thank Ray Powell, founder and executive director of Sealight, Attorney Dino De Leon for a very comprehensive view of the situation ng impeachment ni VP Sara at ng ICC trial ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. At si Jimmy Regalario, chairman ng Kilusang Makabayang Ekonomiya. Buhay pa ba ito hanggang ngayon? Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat. At maraming salamat din sa media na nag-cover sa atin. We'll see you next Saturday.